Reed with Black Talk Radio News. Today we have a special guest, Professor Johanna Fernández, who is a native New Yorker. She received a Ph.D. in history from Columbia University and a B.A. in literature and American civilization from Brown University. Professor Fernández teaches 20th century U.S. history, the history of social movements, the political economy of American cities, and African American history. Professor Fernández is currently working on her forthcoming book on the Young Lords Party, the Puerto Rican counterpart to the Black Panther Party. She joins us today to discuss some recent developments in the case concerning U.S.-held political prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal. Thank you for speaking with us today, Professor.
Thank you so very much for having me on your show.
We have been following closely the health issues with Mumia. He was suffering, or is still suffering, from the hepatitis C virus. And it seems like it was 2 years, correct me if I was wrong, a legal fight for him to get access to the cure. And I understand that he has started his treatment. So what can you tell us about that thus far? How's his treatment going?
Well, his treatment began on April 6th after a very, very long, arduous struggle with the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. A series of suits were filed. A judge, as you know, sided with him and ordered the DOC to treat him immediately beginning in of this year, January 2017, but the DOC essentially engaged in a series of delaying tactics. Essentially, they going to fight this all in part because they knew that once they treated Mumia, they were going to have to treat the 7,000 other prisoners with hepatitis C in Pennsylvania. So the fact that they threw the towel in is a tremendous victory, not just for Mumia, but for the rights of prisoners across the country, and in Pennsylvania in particular, over the question of decent health care. Mumia began getting the treatment on April 6th, about 2 weeks ago, and it's a 12-week treatment wherein he takes 1 pill a day. He will be tested in a number of weeks to see the extent to which the virus has decreased in his body. But this medication is the best medication around. It's not a medication, it's a cure. And we are very hopeful, as is he, that that he will be able to live without hepatitis C in the future.
Now, I did hear his latest commentary, which was published by Prison Radio, for those who would like to hear those political prisoner commentaries, not just from Mumia, but other prisoners. But Mumia issued one last week where he said his victory was sort of bittersweet because, if I'm not mistaken, he was diagnosed, what, 2 years ago? And if he had received treatment then, he may not have received the damage. Is that correct?
Right. So I spoke to Mumia the morning that he was told that he was going to get the hepatitis C treatment. And the news mix of cruelty on the part of the doctor and good news. The cruel aspect of the news was told by the doctor that he had developed cirrhosis. Cirrhosis is a scarring of the liver that one gets as a result of untreated hepatitis C. Now, there are many levels of cirrhosis. and he has the lowest level of cirrhosis at this time, which means that if he takes the medication over the next 12 weeks, he will be able to live a healthy life. However, those who have cirrhosis are more likely to develop liver cancer in the future. So for the rest of his life, he is going to have to be monitored and tested for liver cancer. Again, this should not have happened in the case of Mumia, because we knew that he had hepatitis C quite a long time ago. And it shouldn't happen with any of the approximately 700,000 prisoners across the nation who are suffering with hepatitis C. Why? Because we have a cure for hepatitis C, and delaying the treatment or refusing to treat a prisoner is a violation of the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution. Actually argues against cruel and unusual punishment, and that's in fact what Judge Mariani, who ruled on this court, said. He pretty much said that delaying the known of an illness as serious as hepatitis C was a medieval practice of the past that should not be practiced in American society at all, whether in our communities where many people are suffering for hepatitis C or in the prisons. So
now,
yes.
I'm sorry if I may interject. Now, hepatitis C is contagious, is it not, Professor?
Absolutely, it is contagious. It is a disease that can sexually and through blood transfusions in the past. So Mumia believes that he was infected with hepatitis C, ironically, on the day that he was beaten up by the cops, shot by Officer Faulkner, and rushed to the hospital where he was operated on and transfused at a moment in American history when hospitals were not checking their blood banks for hepatitis C. So he was infected with hepatitis C on that of the events of April 9th, 1981, for which he was subsequently wrongfully imprisoned and sent to death row, where he spent 28 and a half years.
The reason that I want to bring up the issue that this is a contagious disease, and you mentioned 700,000 prisoners estimated across the United States suffering from the hepatitis C virus, that you would think that this will be called an epidemic, a pandemic. You would think that the Centers for Disease Control would be involved, given the contagious nature of this disease and so many individuals being affected. But that's not something I've seen. Have you ever heard that issue raised?
Well, hepatitis C is an epidemic in the United States. More people are dying from hepatitis C than any other disease, including HIV. And
wow.
It's a disease that, of course, is going to disproportionately affect poor communities. 700,000 prisoners across the country have hepatitis C. Prisoners leave prison, they go into our communities, and they infect their loved ones. So this is really a problem of epic proportion, around which we need a public campaign, but also a movement around decent health care in the United States. One of the reasons why there's radio silence of the government on this issue is because the treatment for hepatitis C in the United States costs between $80,000 and $90,000. In a place like India,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that figure again? You said how much?
In the United States, the cure for hepatitis C costs between $80,000 and $90,000. So, to give you a sense of perspective, in places like Egypt and India, the medication costs $200, between $200 and maybe $1,000, $1,500 to cure. So what this means is that healthcare is big business in the United States, and only the wealthy have access to a cure as expensive as this one. And this is why there's raised on the crisis of hepatitis C in poor communities across the country, because the nation, the country, does not want to essentially foot the bill for this medication.
Now, you mentioned Mumia Abu-Jamal's wrongful conviction, and I understand that, was there a hearing Monday, or is there a hearing coming up next Monday in regards to getting him a new trial? What can you tell us about the developments in his criminal case?
Yes, so there is a court hearing on April 24th, 2017, Monday, April 24th, 2017, that will hear a very important issue surrounding his conviction. Can we hold on this Monday, April 24th, 2017, in regards to Mumia's conviction? I think we need to take a step back. Last summer, 2016, the Supreme Court of the United States deliberated on a case called Williams versus Pennsylvania, involving a prisoner in the Pennsylvania system. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of that prisoner. And what did the U.S. Supreme Court say? The U.S. Supreme Court said essentially that a judge who has previously, in the past, served as a prosecutor in the district where that, at the time that he was convicted, cannot, numerous years later, then review the appeals in that prisoner's case. Why? Because if a prosecutor, now turned judge, was in the DA's office, he had an interest in convicting that prisoner, and therefore he cannot review the case for his appeal in an impartial manner. So there's a conflict of interest. So essentially the Supreme Court said to the prisoner, yes, you're absolutely right. You need to get your case and the arguments you presented on appeal reviewed again by a different judge. So this is the issue that Mumia is going to be presenting, or his attorneys are going to be presenting before the court. What's important for your audience to know is that the same judge involved in the case Williams versus Pennsylvania, who had a conflict of interest when reviewing the appeals of the prisoner Williams, is the same judge involved in denying Mumia a very important appeal that he presented to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The name of that judge is Ronald Castile. Ronald Castile was a prosecutor in 1981 when Mumia was arrested and later convicted and sent to death row. In the 1990s, he had moved up the ranks of the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania, and he had become the head judge in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. At that time, he denied Mumia all of the claims, and they were many, that he presented to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court on appeal, arguing all of the ways in which he did not get a fair trial. Well, Mumia's attorneys at that time argued that he should recuse himself, not because he had been a prosecutor previously in the Philly DA's office, although they were aware of that. They asked him to recuse himself because the Fraternal Order of Police, which is the institution that lobbied and was determined to ensure that Mumia got executed, funded that judge's campaign to the Supreme Court. I don't know if you know, but judges in Pennsylvania are not appointed, they're elected. So the Fraternal Order of Police funded that judge's campaign, and they identified him as Man of the Year. That same year that Mumia presented his appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And what Ronald Castile did was that he wrote a response to Mumia's attorneys, telling them that he was not going to recuse himself because 7 other judges in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court also received funding from the Fraternal Order of Police. And if he had to recuse himself, then that meant that the entire panel of judges in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court would also have to recuse themselves, except for maybe 2. So this is the situation we have in Pennsylvania, that there is an incestuous relationship between cops, judges, and prosecutors. Prosecutors essentially are determined to convict prisoners by hook or crook. And when they do so, and they win a conviction, they get to rise up the ranks of the criminal justice system for being tough on crime. And then when the prisoner presents evidence that's either exculpatory or that suggests that they got an unfair trial, the same judge that had been involved in prosecuting them denies them an appeal. And so for this reason, on April 24th, 2017, this coming Monday, it's not only Mumia who's presenting his case before the court. There are 16 other prisoners who are presenting the same issue in court on Pennsylvania. And they are part of a legion of probably thousands of prisoners in Pennsylvania who whose rights were violated in the same way, and who are also putting their grievance before the court once again in light of this very important case Williams versus Pennsylvania, which sided with the prisoner last summer.
As you were laying out what was going on here, I had to assume that there was a whole lot of other prisoners whose rights were violated in the same way, as I'm sure that has probably been standard operating procedure for decades in Pennsylvania, with prosecutors moving up the system, becoming judges, and then refusing to recuse themselves from cases where they were prosecutors at these offices that prosecuted those cases. So it's good to hear that other prisoners will also be presenting with him. What can supporters of Mumia do to help him? I understand there's also a call to pack the court.
So there's a call to pack the court, but there's also a rally outside of the court, which begins at 8 a.m., and that's at the Criminal Justice Center, which is at 1303 Filbert Street in Philadelphia. Once again, that's 1303 Filbert Street in Philadelphia. Ironically, this is the day of Mumia's birthday. So we're going to be packing the court, but we have a full day of meetings and marches and rallies around his case. We are going to enter, the proceedings in the court begin at 9, and people are going to take turns going into the court while the rally continues outside. And then at approximately 12 noon, we expect to march to the DA's office right around the corner, and the governmental buildings of the city of Philadelphia. And then in the evening from 6 to 9, we have a forum that we're asking people to attend. And this is an organizing forum. And it's titled Resistance Matters, Legal and Medical Justice, Mumia and All Prisoners. So this is really an opportunity like no other to raise the profile of Mumia's case, but also to tie Mumia's case to the cases of hundreds of thousands of others in Pennsylvania and across the country who've been railroaded in the courts. So Mumia is the most famous prisoner in the world. Can you imagine what the world would look like? And can you imagine the confidence that our movements would get if Mumia were to walk out of these dungeons tomorrow? It would give people a sense of what's possible. It would shift consciousness around the prisons and the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania and across the country. Essentially, it would expose what we already know, the corruption that exists in the prison, and it would help to illuminate the ways in which the narrative of crime in this country has been used for the past 40 years, 50 years since the civil rights movement by politicians to deflect attention away from the real issues in society, right? The politicians have used the narrative of crime and the politics of crime to scapegoat Black people and to essentially convince white America that the problem is the Blacks and not the Trumps and the Clintons and corporate America. So this is a really important issue that really is the linchpin of the ideology that keeps people on top of society, in power, in control of the situation, and that keeps people with the same class interests from actually coming together to fight the bigger battle against healthcare for profit under capitalism, and against, the degradation and poverty that so many people face in the nation, and that keep people from seeing that if we don't come together, we are facing in this world and in this country an environmental catastrophe of epic proportion that'll shut everything down. So part of what we want to do in the movement to free Mumia is identify a strategy that puts racism and the fight against the criminal justice system at the forefront, but that makes connections to the other important struggles that we can't ignore. And we need to develop a strategy ideologically to challenge the narrative of crime and its uses by those in power in American society, but that also develops a strategy for direct action to bring about Mumia's freedom, but ultimately a movement that will take back power and give it to the people at the bottom of society in the United States.
As we conclude this interview, would you one more time give out information for those who would like to participate in the activity that will be going on April the 24th, this coming Monday at Mumia's hearing? Could you get that information out one more time? Yes.
I will say that people should email bringmumiahome@gmail.com. So for more information and to get involved and to join us in Philadelphia, in New York, beyond April 24th, please email bringmumiahome@gmail.com. We're asking people to stand with Mumia on Monday, April 24th, in court, where there is a very important issue that is going to be heard around his conviction. We have not had an opportunity like this in a very long time in this case. We are asking people to come rally with us in Philadelphia. The address is 1303 Filbert Street. That's right outside of the Criminal Justice Center where his case is going to be heard. We're asking people to rally between 8 and 9 a.m. At 9 a.m., we are going to go into the court, but the court is very small. So people are going to take turns going in and out while the rally continues outside. At around noon, we are going to march to the DA's office and to the governor's office and to the mayor's office in Philadelphia, raising the profile of Mumia Abu-Jamal. As you probably know, there is a media blackout in Philadelphia around Mumia's case, in part because the cops, the media, the DA, and the mayor are in cahoots. And so the only way that we can get that we can influence the narrative is essentially by hitting the streets. So we're asking people to join us in the streets at 8 a.m. or at around 12 noon to rally. But then in the evening, we want to develop a strategy for educating people around Mumia's case, raising the profile of his case, and linking his case to those of others in Pennsylvania and around the country. From 8 to 9, we are going to be gathering at the Arch Street United Methodist Church, which is at 55 North Broad Street. Again, from 6 to 9, we're going to have an organizing forum in Philadelphia. We are going to be meeting at the Arch Street United Methodist Church, which is at 55 North Broad Street. And the title of that organizing forum is Resistance Matters, Legal and Medical Justice for Mumia and All Prisoners. So that is the schedule of activities for April 24th, 2017. It's the day of Mumia's birthday. It's a day that historically, for over 30 years, the movement to free Mumia has engaged in some kind of protest or direct action. So we're asking people to stand with the voice of the voiceless, to come celebrate the victory with us and join us as we continue the fight to free Mumia, all political prisoners, and to end...
Professor Fernández, and we wish you much luck in your endeavors.
Thank you, Scotty Reed, for your work. Part of what we need to do in this period is take back the narrative. And we're going to take back the narrative by building a movement, but also by building alternative media. And